So, hello. These first Fridays of the month come around very quickly for those of us who are regulars at our Brunch with Friends. So, welcome to everybody. Normally, I would be saying hello to you from Big and Bull country, but I just mentioned to a couple of people I'm having a little family holiday at Alexandra Headlands on the Sunshine Coast. So, I'm on Cubby Cubby and Ginniburra land today, joining you, which is lovely. I'm going to ask people to pop in the chat where you are joining this call from, because we do have, certainly at the moment, the eastern side of Australia sorted. Our WA contingent's always a little bit late for the group or may not be able to join us today. But if you can use the chat to just share the land on which you're joining us from on this call. We certainly have got Queensland and New South Wales sorted, and a little bit of we'll even let a Victorian in today, Joel. It's lovely to have you here. I know everybody on the call, or at least have said hello. I am one half of the connection table. My co-founder, Jo Palmer, is with her children today and not able to join us. And the whole reason that we started the connection table was to get more rural, regional and remote voices to decision-making tables. So we know that there's leaders all over the country, and particularly representing rural, regional and remote. And we think that decisions are better, cheaper, and more likely to last if we're at the table to start with, rather than as an afterthought. And some of you know that that's the message I bang on about regularly, loudly, and often. So we are a membership-based organisation, but these Brunch with Friends are open to anybody who wants to build a network into the regions, and also as an opportunity for us to meet people we might not otherwise cross paths with. Enter my very dear friend, Nick Forrester. So, Nick, I would welcome you. I welcome you as one of my Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander dear friends, and I will let you share an acknowledgement yourself. But I'd love to welcome you here today. We have crossed paths in the land of innovation through our other friend Lee Diffie, and also I would acknowledge Duncan as the third musketeer of our little gang of musketeers. But I'd love to welcome you today to share a little of who you are, what makes you you, and then a bit about the role that you've got now. And from there, we'll go and ask other questions. For people who are new to Brunch with Friends, we use the chat a lot. So feel free to pop questions in for Nick Forrester. Feel free to add your LinkedIn chat. Or LinkedIn link, I should say. So this is a way to build our networks. And then after Nick's answered a couple of questions from me, I'm going to throw to the rest of you as a broader conversation around any of the themes that Nicole might bring up or questions that you've got from her. Now, the other thing that I've got to do, because otherwise they rouse on me, is just let me sort this out behind the scenes, Nick. I'm going to do it so that you are the... you'll have the prize view for a little minute, but I will I'll sort that while you maybe start to introduce yourself. And great to see people into the chat already. Love it.
Thank you so much, Julia, for the invitation for Brunch with Friends. I love this format and feel already that I've just made a whole bunch of new friends or seen old friends that I haven't seen for a while, all from the comfort of my living room chair here on Quandamooka country. For those of you who might not know where Quandamooka country is, it is the area known as Moreton Bay and includes the islands, for example, Minjerribah, also known as North Stradbroke. And I live just on the edge of the mainland looking over Gucci and over to Minjerribah, which is a very, very special part of Australia. And I want to extend my respects to the elders and ancestors of the lands here in Quandamooka country, but also for all of the places that you are joining from. I try to remind people that we are all on country all of the time, regardless of where we are in this nation that we now call Australia, and that we are walking on the footsteps of thousands of years of continuous culture and stewardship for this place. And so that might actually then kind of help me roll into a little bit of storytelling. What makes me me? What a great question. I think that there's a whole PhD thesis I could do on that, but won't bore you with all of that level of detail. I am a Wiradjuri woman. And my family connections are to Parkes, Forbes, and Condobolin in central West New South Wales. But because of previous government policies and how they shaped the existence and experience of Aboriginal people here, my family hasn't lived on our country for 3 generations. And I share that in a way to normalize that people might not understand that, there wasn't choice. It wasn't a decision that was made. It happened to us. And yeah, I think it's important to help people understand that context, because for good reasons, I grew up all over Australia. And that is definitely an integral part of what makes me me. I am not is what's commonly known as an army brat. And my dad's decision to join the army and create a family that grew up all over the country, it was truly formational, because every time we moved, which was between every 18 months and 2 years, but from the time I was born until I finished high school, I would have a new community to learn from and connect with, to become a part of. And those communities were both Aboriginal and sometimes not. I sometimes went to schools where there were very few Aboriginal students. And I think that what that did was help me have a deep sense of empathy, and appreciation of difference. And so much so that I crave that level of diverse perspectives and experiences in my life, which then kind of flowed through to how I became this very long and windy journey of what people could call a career. I would say it was more like an unexpected series of excellent adventures that kept building upon each other, but were not planned in any way whatsoever. I think if someone went and asked my parents, what did Nick want to be when she was growing up, they would have said something like a vet or a marine biologist or something like that, something related to animals and the ocean. And I did not study ecology or biology at uni, but I'm glad that I went, because it gave me a set of skills that then I was able to transfer to other areas. I think formatively, the journey started when I joined the Oodgeroo Noonuccal unit at QUT after graduating from my undergrad and doing a little bit of time overseas teaching English and then coming back, because being able to be a part of a Black academic unit inside, a large, high quality institution, educational institution, really helped me start to be able to articulate what it means to bring First Nations perspectives and embed them in decision making for and with everybody. And so I really am thankful for that time that I had at the Oodgeroo unit, and for the friendships and the mentoring that I got that are still, now 30 years on, I draw upon in my work about how to help people understand that sharing First Nations perspectives and voices, like regional, remote, and rural, are central to really good decision making that will last and have good impact. And so, a very abridged version is that after the Oodgeroo unit, I got to do something really cool, which was to serve the Australian government overseas a couple of times. And in between those services, got to work in the North Pacific in community development, specifically around climate adaptation, and the links between climate and security. So it's interesting now in this role as the Chief Representative Officer for WWF Australia, all of those experiences over the last 25 years have really come together in a single role, which is what makes it so exceptional and exciting and different. Because I can draw on work I did 15 years ago in international security with the North Pacific communities and the US Defense Department to adapt to climate change, because those learnings and experiences are now and a part of the mainstream discourse, how climate and nature, the crises are actually affecting our ability to be secure as a nation. And so 15 months ago, I was already in a job that I loved, that Julia and I and Lee and Duncan and others were having a fantastic time, really making some incredible impact, when this role at WWF spoke to me in a way that I was like, I gotta try and see if this could be real, to be so close to the impact by working for a global nature organization, but one that doesn't just do place-based work, with specific species in specific geographies, but that also does all of the work in between, all the way through to global treaty negotiations. And that's where I get to bring all of the different pieces of the long, windy journey to come together in a single narrative, which is really around how we can help as individuals create collective change around this transformational idea that humans are not separate to nature. And I think, with the passing of Dr. Jane Goodall yesterday, now is a really poignant time for us to reflect that each as individuals, we have an opportunity to contribute to that collective change, and that collective change has to mean something. And that was something, it was the what kind of difference you want to make conversation that Dr. Jane Goodall was so good at leading, because the what kind of change that I would like to make is to help, in particular, non-Indigenous developed communities see themselves as in and of nature, just the way that me as an Aboriginal woman knows that I am of country and from country, and I'm a part of that. That was a very long, rambling answer to your question, Julia.
I bloody love it, and we could go down 1,000 rabbit holes. And I am conscious we're a smaller group today, and so for the people that are watching watching this as a recorded, pity you guys not to be part of this conversation live. Basically, I'm really happy for people to unmute themselves if you've got questions, comments for Nick. There's great chat happening, but also, I just popped something in the chat myself around, so people on this call know my background's like environmental science, land care and catchment management, and it was always so interesting to others. We would be looking at projects, and people would realize really quickly that farmers and the local Aboriginal health group actually have far more in common than they ever realized, when we would start talking about catchment planning and caring for country and all of the rest of it. And so there's far more that unites us and divides us. There's some fair divisions at the best of times, but your comment around climate, around food security, around the remote communities in particular, have you got examples? And Joel, really keen to ask you some questions as well, given the work you're looking to do. Have you got some examples of where you see things happening really well at the moment? Do you see it with WWF? Have you seen it with other work? For me, I always need some spotlights. You can find so many areas where it's just absolute, basket case, but give me some shining lights.
So I'll give you one which really touches me, because it's placing Australia in a role of supporter rather than hero, which I love.
Yeah, me too. Good.
Yep. So there's a group of women spread across 4 distinct remote communities in the Solomon Islands that we support. And over the last 5 years, they have returned their sea country to great health through their stewardship of sea grapes. And sea grapes is a really interesting story in the Solomon Islands because it has been a traditional part of a food basket for those communities. But also, as communities change the demographics, it became a cash crop. But one of the things that the women knew from their long held knowledges was that the sea grape is really good for skincare. And so over the last 5 years, is a part of that stewardship that the women have been leading. We've been supporting them to manage the harvest in a way that they can return the seed grape harvest to health, which helps with the climate adaptation because of it's a disruptor of wave action, so less erosion. So we've got the climate piece and the nature restoration piece. And then also there's a woman intergenerational livelihood piece, because the women are teaching their daughters, and they own these micro businesses themselves and as a collective, and they are creating skincare value add products which are being sold in Honiara. So they have an independent income stream that they are also able to help educate their daughters with. So there's lots of angles and layers to that example. And, really thankful for the role that the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade play in supporting that work and how that's happened. But the story, the hero is these women in remote communities in the Solomons who have harnessed their own traditional knowledges in new and innovative ways for their daughters, which is pretty cool, I think.
I love it. You're very outnumbered on this call, Joel, but we all, there's some really cool ways in which that's going on. Hello, Viv. Sorry, I didn't see you join us. I've moved us to this sort of a screen so we can do a bit of Brady Bunch and also have some conversations. Does anybody want to unmute themselves, ask a question, make a comment?
I love being outnumbered.
Good work.
It's quite rare as a 44-year-old cis white male to be in the minority, particularly with the microphone.
Yeah.
So the work that I'm doing in Regen Melbourne is historically quite metropolitan focused, and Regen Melbourne was born 5 years out of the confluence of, we had some horrible bushfires in Victoria that impacted metropolitan Melbourne, combined with COVID. And as horrible as that was, there was a few themes that emerged out of that sort of formed the genesis of Regen Melbourne. And one that I think is really relevant to this brunch with friends and bringing people together is just how it brought a bit of that community fabric back. People in streets and neighbourhoods suddenly getting to know each other again, because they sort of were forced to within a 5-kilometre radius. But the other thing it did was it really, brought the impacts of climate change, yes, to the front of people's minds, but also brought them into nature. Because again, when you were sort of trapped in your 5 kilometres, you became intimately familiar with the local creek or the local park. And, a lot of people, city slickers who sort of spent their entire lives living inside metropolitan Melbourne, were suddenly engaging with nature and climate change and community in ways that we probably hadn't seen for a long time. So, out of crisis comes opportunity, and thus Regen Melbourne was born, and we're trying to really draw out the positive aspects of that period for Melbourne and try to link climate action at a neighbourhood level to community and local action and local leadership. And we've just branched out, as I mentioned in the chat, to this project around nourished neighbourhoods, which is another thing that COVID showed, is just how brittle our food systems are. And so before you even get to the carbon miles of getting food into a metropolis like Melbourne, really trying to help Melburnians understand what it means to be part of a food system and how to make it more robust and build a deeper understanding for where the food is actually coming from. So it's been fascinating trying to work through what that means, I guess, culturally for a lot of people, particularly recent migrants who have moved from a big metropolitan Asian city to the outer suburbs of Melbourne, and what that means for their relationships with food and food systems as well. So ultimately, our biggest challenge is how do we bring people together for conversations who would not normally come together
Yeah,
in a digital
awesome,
world.
Joel. So Nick, I'd love your thoughts on that. Joel, I'm also going to suggest Kate Giles is at Bundaberg, so massive food bowl there, done lots of work. We've got Viv McCollum, who's got a background in ag extension and working with groups of farmers. You've got Lee Diffie, who actually pretty much just all of this proudly used to work with primary industries and's done a lot with the Queensland government. And Ali and Francis are both all across bringing regional communities together. So this is your crew, right? So track them all down, and everybody, I've seen a few LinkedIn things, but we'll all have some ideas of different bits and pieces. Nick, can I throw to you about, that bringing the groups together, because you've done that in lots of different ways.
Yeah, and I was just kind of picking up on that food systems piece. One of the things that I think is really encouraging and momentum is growing around is bringing what's Sharon Burrows, the former ACTU head before she went to Brussels. She's got a book, Radical Partnerships, right? And I think we're starting to see that radical partnerships really in the food systems space, especially around land use by diversification by primary producers. So we're having lots of conversations with the entire food system supply chain around, okay, you're a large takeaway fast food organization. We won't name anyone specific, but you can think of a few that require large amounts of primary produce, particularly protein, and how to serve that demand in a supply which is nature positive, and in particular, how you can diversify land use, which is important for primary producers from a alternative income source, but also about nature regeneration. So really about design planning primary production land so that it's regenerating the nature while increasing productivity from multiple sources through co-benefits. And that kind of work is really bringing together what perhaps the farmers would have thought of as the deep greenies, but working together side by side. Because there's a recognition that the demand for the protein is there. How do we help design for it in a way that the farmers benefit and nature and the communities benefit as well? And that's really exciting work to see that momentum move from talking, which has been happening for some time, into actually doing. We've got a number of primary producers who have, for different reasons, changed their land use models. And now we're starting to get a little bit of scale behind that.
It's wonderful to hear you mention Sharon. My CEO, Kai, is chairing a panel on Wednesday with Sharon and with Uncle Dean Sanders in terms of how we build those broader coalitions of conversation. So I'll make sure he's read that book, which I'm sure Kai has, but it's a really good point.
Great panel board conversation by the sounds of it. Dean's also awesome, so very cool.
I'm lucky enough to be spending Monday and Tuesday with Dean on country, so I'm feeling very fortunate.
Yeah.
Awesome. Other questions or comments for Nick? Thoughts of how we bring people together? Hello, Christy.
Hi, sorry, I was late.
Don't apologize.
I am here, sorry.
Hi. Nick, one of the things I was keen to ask you, because I love kind of testing thoughts with you, as you know, it was really interesting, a quick little sideline, but Nicole, myself, and another lady ended up on a panel recently at a really typical tech bro event on the Gold Coast, and we were the diversity panel. and it did not, and it didn't. It we noticed that there were a lot of people that left the session just as we were getting up to talk on stage. And what was really cool was we didn't have to be the ones to make it really obvious. A couple of the gents in the room actually drew attention to it in the question time. But it was certainly an interesting panel. But I know, you know, one of the things that you end up doing and is often something for us regionally, and, you know, these intersection pieces at the moment, I think are just becoming clearer and clearer. Joel just talked to a few in his experience, you know, in terms of Melbourne and COVID and various activities. I see it a lot, you know, in that intersection of regions, First Nations, women, people of migrant background, in terms of confidence to have a voice and confidence to be able to talk. Sometimes there's some intersections there. But can you just talk to us or give us some examples of how you have worked through a situation, either in that sort of intersection or just in general, about stepping into a conversation that you think needs to be had? Often on these calls, we end up sharing examples where we've had to step into a situation where we have not necessarily felt confident or comfortable to do it, but it's got to be done. And I reckon you've maybe had a few more examples of that as well. So just if there's an example you've got, or a question or statement you could give us as a bit of something we can have in our back pockets. Does that kind of make sense as a question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
It's funny because I was having this conversation yesterday with a member of my team who is an incredible talent and is such a subject matter expert and wants to grow into a leadership role. And we were talking about the role of confidence, because she has all of the other aspects that you would want in such a talent, you know. So she's got her deep technical expertise. She's got that empathy piece around how to put yourself and understand the perspective of others. That when you listen, sorry, I'll come back to the confidence thing. There's a confidence to step into spaces and own those spaces. And I use the word own, but through a collective framing rather than own as me as an individual. Be a part of, belong to that space is where I'm coming from when I mean own the space for myself within the collective. And the role of confidence that is I think often for women, especially when you put an intersectional lens of it, women from regional and remote areas, women of color, women who are migrants. So when you kind of add those layers of experience, we put on ourselves a lens of competency. So before stepping into spaces like that and owning spaces to speak with confidence, we kind of give ourselves a checklist, you know, about competency. Should I be speaking about this? Do I have the authority to speak about this? And when I was talking with my team member yesterday, I was kind of having a development conversation with her, but around, you have everything you need. Right? That was the message that I was explaining to her, and that she is confident and she is able to sense the room and understand her place within it and how to navigate that space sensitively with others. And that the confidence that she can draw, because she is competent, because we already know to be who she is, where she is, already she's had to show her competency. And so take that as your given and draw strength from your competency, and draw confidence from that so you can step in and own that space. I think about a pep talk that was, and so in sharing that with her, I thought about a pep talk that was given to me a long time ago when I was nervous about stepping into a space and owning it and speaking with authority. I'm using very loaded terms, but they're often the terms that I said that about women in our leadership, that we might not have or do, and I just think that they look different for us. That's all. And the pep talk was along the lines of, do you know your stuff? Yes. Have you done your homework? Yes. Like, are you able to speak to this content? Yes. You know more about this than anyone else in the room. You are the expert. So draw upon that to speak with confidence and to really open that space for that conversation. And I think where I've used that pep talk the most is in the really deeply uncomfortable conversations that I have to have. And those conversations are often around people not understanding that the system by default is exclusive. And unless you actually intentionally design spaces to be inclusive, they will remain exclusive by default. And people, really well-intentioned people in government and in other spaces, but I'm speaking from my time in government, sometimes they don't recognize the exclusivity of those spaces. And so it's deeply uncomfortable for them to have someone explain to them that by default the system is exclusive, and by default they need to be intentionally inclusive if they want different outcomes. And moving away, when I moved out of government and into the business sector, having those conversations and having to reframe them from one of, you'll get better decisions that last longer, that are more impactful, back to your starting point, Julia, into a business setting where I was explaining your profitability will increase. You will outperform your competitors in the market if you take this inclusive approach. And so speaking into those spaces with that confidence is based on, for me, competence, which is a given, because we wouldn't be here doing what we're doing unless we had that.
Yeah. Some really key pieces in there. Thank you for that, because I think that is the thing, right? And back to the intersection, and Lee, I can see your question there, but do you want to unmute yourself and ask it? I think there's some really powerful stuff there, and it's not just for women, or it's not just for the regions, but it is really important that we keep remembering that there's ways to kind of come at this and still be able to hold our own space for some of these conversations. Lee, can I throw to you for your question?
Yeah, sure. I was wanting to draw on, I guess, what I know of your experience, like the magic that you and Duncan created at Cherbourg, for example, which was, a long journey for different people. But you talked about the sea grapes, but I think you started to touch on it there when you were talking as well. But I guess what guides you when you're going into these situations where you've got new models or new systems, or whatever it is that meet tradition, and tradition might mean government, but it might mean just this is how we've always done things around here. It might also mean crusty old farmers that don't want to change. Like, there's a whole bunch of different contexts in which you come across these things, and we all know that if you approach them in creative and truly engaging ways, you break down those barriers, then they can become opportunities. But I'm interested in how you, in your experiences, what's guided you, because you've done it so well over time, and that's why you've had this fun mystery ride of a career, because you've been able to jump across these sort of barriers to create opportunities.
Well, thanks, Lee. You're very kind. I think the interesting jumps across barriers have been created by partnership, and partnership is built on relationship, and relationship is built on trust. And the investing time in building trust first is the key, the unlock. Just even coming to a conversation with no agenda other than listening. That has been, I think, one of the single most powerful tools that I've had. And actually it kind of, I was just thinking about where did that come to kind of be a part of my practice. A very long time ago, very early in my career, at the time actually probably thought it was a bit misfortune rather than fortune, because I was like, oh, what's going on here? But I was given the job of managing Australia's international candidacies in the UN system. And it might sound glamorous, but it's not. It's really kind of quite technical and process driven. There's a lot of candidacies all the time, and the UN member country states vote on them and they trade votes. But what doing that role taught me about was really listening for in divergent or very different perspectives, listening for the overlap of interests, because ultimately, nation states are made up of humans, and humans have, as Julia said at the beginning, much more in common than we have different. And so in really contentious spaces, for example, the UN Human Rights Council candidacy was one, along with the Security Council. Like, there was a number of really big candidacies that I helped secure. Listening without knowing what the other wanted, because I think we all have that precognition. We listen, even though when we're listening, we already, we've got a number of tracks happening in our heads. And one of those tracks will be, okay, well, they've said this and I want to respond this way. But listening without knowing means that you kind of turn that track off, and then you're able to pick up those pieces of expression which help you then lay the pattern, so the pattern of alignment, and from there I can build trust and build relationship, and from there build partnership, which allows for barriers that many people would think impossible to cover actually don't even become a barrier anymore. It's almost kind of like, well, that wasn't really that hard. It's literally not rocket science or brain surgery, and kind of things that people perceive to be enduring and insurmountable just kind of slide away, and the path of the resolution. Now, there's lots of things that have to happen in the detail of that kind of lasagna. But if I was looking for kind of like what are the thick pieces of pasta in between that, it's really about a relational rather than tactical or transactional approach.
It's the lasagna analogy is making me hungry. Kate, you had a really lovely question that you had posed in the chat for Nick, and I'm going to broaden that out to see if others have got asks or need support with anything as well before we head to the finish line at 1:30. But Kate Giles, can you ask your question, please?
You're on mute, Kate.
Come on, Kate. We've nearly got.
Sorry,
there.
just had to flick through a few screens. Yeah, so really interested, I guess, to learn a little bit more about the role that you do with WWF. I've had a little bit to do with them through Ecotourism Australia, but understanding some of the regeneration projects, or maybe one that's really hot at the moment that you've got your teeth sunk into, would love to hear about that. But then also, if there's a way that you might need support, or particularly within the group, if we can offer any sort of connection that you might be struggling to need help with. That was where I was going.
I love that. Thanks, Kate. So we have lots of really cool stuff that we're working on at the moment. The things that excite me the most are things that are intersectional or integrated, that they bring together a number of the facets of our work. So, for example, many people know WWF for our work specifically with wildlife. And some people might know us for our work specifically with koala. Very important work. Koala, especially on the East Coast in New South Wales, they're threatened, and they could be extinct by 2050 if we don't kind of what we call bend the curve, right? So at the moment, the species numbers are on a downward trajectory. We need to bend the curve and get the species numbers up. And what we recognize is that you can't help a specific species without actually developing a habitat restoration approach within a larger landscape, especially for a species like koala, which love to move up and down corridors. And those corridors of koala habitat have been disrupted. Urban development, roads, you name it, right? So one of the projects I've really got my teeth into at the moment is called our Koala Friendly Carbon Initiative. And what it is we took our species work with koala, and through a habitat approach, so building connected corridors across hundreds of kilometers of land, that the koala corridor had been disrupted for a number of reasons, including the bushfires and the floods in the northern rivers. So this particular track that I'm talking about is in northern New South Wales. It starts around kind of Bangalore and spreads up and down the coast. Up the coast, the corridor of koala is actually all the way through into southeast Queensland. If we can reconnect it, that's the goal. To make that work and fund that for the species and the broader biodiversity, we've built a carbon credit for the trees that we've planted. So the koala, the eucalypts, which the koalas eat, and we're selling this credit to fund more planting and more restoration, so that we don't have to necessarily rely on donations, but also so that we can work across different types of land tenure. So instead of it being just public land or private land or Indigenous protected area land, it doesn't matter what type of land it is, because the carbon credit creates an income, and all types of landholders want an income. So I love that particular example because it stacks impact upon impact upon impact. Another thing I love about that particular project is that where we've been working with private landholders, we've been able to get the traditional custodians of those areas that don't have natal title because it's on private land, access to those traditional lands to help care for country as a part of the stewardship for the koala habitat trees. So it's got just multiple layers to it. And that's an example of what regenerative conservation looks like. Sometimes people ask me, what is regenerative about the conservation work at WWF? Conservation work 50 years ago, and still some conservation work that happens, not as much in Australia, but a little bit, and a lot overseas, is this idea of lock it up land. So that land has to be exactly what it was. We have to restore it to what it was, and then we can't touch it. Well, in this country, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we had a productive relationship with our land that was based on our stewardship that was in balance. So regenerative conservation recognizes that and builds that into the way that we conserve and care for country.
Love that project. Sounds awesome.
But you did have a follow-up second part to that, which was, how can we help? So I've got a mindset shift request. It is a call to action. If, as individuals, we can help ourselves and the people that we know see themselves as a part of nature, and that our future prosperity is absolutely reliant upon nature thriving or a healthy country, that recognition would be transformational. Because at the moment, over 50% of Australia's economy requires nature to deliver its productivity. So more than half of our economy is nature dependent, but we don't see nature as something that we have to continue to look after for that productivity because we feel separated from it. If we could just change that mindset and see ourselves as a part of nature, therefore we have to look after it to continue our own prosperity, I think we could change the world. That's my request of help from each of you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, Nick, and that's a great call to action for us all. I mean, we often, and I'm conscious John Scriven's on the call. Hello, Scrivo. So you're looking at Southwest Queensland's best pig chaser in Pig Hunter in John Scriven. We worked in the Landcare groups together. But that piece around nature being on the balance sheet, right? Like, how do we actually value it, and what does that look like, is certainly one of those things. Oh, Scrivo, you've even got it on your shirt, I can see. Good work. I think certainly, and Emma Kate's on there as well, certainly looking at, how do we change this thinking and how do we see ourselves as part of it, is a really important takeaway for us all. Nick, what's the best way? I'm conscious we've got a few minutes left. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they'd like to follow something up, if they'd like to
Email, I think.
add you to their network?
Yeah, please add me on LinkedIn. But I'm not as great on answering LinkedIn messages. They seem to kind of just all end up in the box, and then I'm like, oh. So email, I'll just drop my email into the chat. That'd be great. That's the best way to get a hold of me. I'm pretty diligent with my email, so if you write to me, I will write back.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure, knowing some of the work that people on this call are doing, that they'll want to reach out. And likewise to others, if it's email, if it's LinkedIn, the advantage is that you now have Nick in your network as well, regardless of where we're based across Australia. But we also have built a network amongst each other. So please feel free to share, for those who haven't yet, LinkedIn chat or whatever it might be. Nick.
I've got a question for everybody on the chat.
Brilliant. Hit them with it.
So how can so that regenerative mindset shift, what can we, WWF, do better or differently to help people have that mindset shift? What does this Brains Trust think could make a difference in shifting mindsets, in clicking into that? Any ideas? All ideas welcome.
Hey, Nick, it's Lee. I think that's the first time anyone's actually said that to me. So maybe say it more, basically. Like,
Great.
it's kind of like assumed knowledge.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of people for whom it's new. Like, I've kind of, and I'm kind of tapped into, what's going on and why, but I've never had anyone just say what you just said. So I think that would actually be helpful.
Great. Thank you. You're right. Assumed knowledge. And yeah,
which means we assume all sorts of different things, and we probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, Joel, that's a really, really good point. Interestingly, we're seeing the young ones, they get it. It's the kind of the decision makers and the older people that are less likely to have that recognition, but absolutely the school system's key.
I've got an idea too, Nick.
Yeah.
Quick one before we end. I think it's around something that's shareable in a video format that really resonates with people, and particularly their families and young people. Maybe it's them sitting like in the trees like you are now with a screen behind you, or some type of natural environment, and showing what that could look like maybe for children, or in 50 years or 70 years, and that visual devastation that may occur if no mindset change happens, but also reiterating that with voiceover, like you've just mentioned, around the economics of nature being so important. Just an idea.
Love it. Thanks, Kate.
EK, you've got your hand up.
I do, and I'll be really quick, but I've kind of been on this journey for a little bit, and for us at Food Connect Shed, we started with the conversation with the Murray community here in Brisbane, and that was the first thing we did, and they're actually shareholders in the shed as well. So taking the time, as Nick was saying, to listen and not have any expectations. And, we're so used in our Western society to have deadlines and to get shit done and to, set ourselves goals and strategic plans and all this stuff. sometimes you've just got to let all that go and just trust that things will happen when they need to happen. You know, forcing things, one of my biggest learnings, because I'm always in urgent mode with climate change and social change and all the things that need to happen. And I think having that mindset of hastening slowly. So having your eye on, you know, the big things that matter, but doing it in a way that's really mindful and connected into the place and the people that you're working side by side with. So I am still on a journey, but that's just something that I've learned over the last few years.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, EK. And I also actually suggested to Joel, wherever Joel is, that he reach out to you. So good that you both have ended up here. And Ali, you've put a great comment in the chat there as well. Thank you. So Nick, there's some feedback there too. Team, these hours go really quickly when we have the legends that we have who are happy to waltz in with little information from me and spend an hour chatting with whoever shows up in the room, really. So thank you, Nicole, on behalf of everybody here who has been able to have this hour with you live. We really appreciate you showing up and sharing in the way that you have. We never know where these conversations will go, but they always go somewhere interesting, and we are, you know, those of us who are on here are actively responsible for how we spend the hour as well. So thanks to everybody who shared. Thanks for those who came for their first brunch with friends. We hope it won't be the last time that you're part of these conversations, and to everybody else as well. I'm going to, so Nick, thank you. Can I give you the final recorded word before I stop recording?
We are more powerful together than we are as individuals, and I love this coming together. And please keep in touch with each other and with me. Thank you.